WagerTalk Selection Sunday.
Bryan Power.
Nobody could hear you.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, go ahead now.
You're good.
Can you hear
Why
me?
did they tell me you couldn't hear me? I can hear you.
Because you do that thing where you overmodulate in the first 8 seconds of what you say is like bleeped out. So welcome in, Bryan.
Oh boy, here we go. Let's start again from. Oh boy, here we go. Let's start again from the top, shall we?
Oh, there we go. What the whistle?
Yes.
I think we already started.
Mics are hot.
I'll be wearing my New Mexico Lobos gear that if they get to Sunday, Ryan. That's who I'll be rooting for. That's a big fan base. I'll tell you what, they'll travel. New Mexico will have a ton of fans in Cleveland. Yeah, that was the original. That was the original time that was posted was 6:15. My CBS has now gone to a tornado warning in central New York. I didn't even know we got fucking tornadoes here, but apparently we do. It says tornado warning. I don't know. That's not quite by me. Tornado warning, Route 28. Where the fuck is Route 28? Oh, that's yeah, that's out toward Herkimer. I think I'm all right. We're not really worried about.
Welcome to the WagerTalk Selection Sunday special.
Keep going. Keep talking. Talk.
Well,
Can you hear me now?
Special. We are
Mics are
Morning
hot.
Wager hosting. I don't know for how much longer. Mark Zeno is distracting me, gesturing wildly.
No,
They're telling
don't blame
me,
me.
hold on. Oh, I'm going to blame you all the way for that. That was a disgraceful thing to do. They said, hold up, and then you said, keep going.
No, they didn't.
We are here. Yes, they did.
said
And
you're good.
No, they didn't. But I'm going to tell you
Mics
what
are
we're
hot.
good about. Instant reaction to the NCAA tournament bracket as they're already released. And there is some controversy. North Carolina is in.
This committee needs to be investigated. They need to be investigated.
Well,
It's a joke.
I mean, I was going to say, do you have a reaction? But that would be like
It's a
asking
joke.
the sun coming up in the morning. So
a team
please.
that's 1-12 against quad one wins from a very down ACC got in this tournament. This is, I mean, what is this? Alabama football? We just put them in because of the logo. That's it. I mean, that's not they're not a tournament team at all.
Well, not a lot of people thought they were going to get in. I will say this. They are favored against San Diego State. And so from a power ratings perspective, odds makers think they're better than their first four opponent. It will not be just Mark Zeno and I, by the way, on this broadcast. We are being joined by three of the very best at WagerTalk: Steve Merril, Adam Trigger, and Rob Veno. Let me bring Steve Merril in right now for his reaction to, I guess, the first controversy of this bracket. North Carolina, North Kakalaki, Zeno, dare I say, making the field of 68. Your thoughts? Are you surprised? Are you disgusted? Are you going to bet them? Your reaction?
Well, I mean, first of all, the fact that they're favorite tells you a little something. We do see this every year. The team that everyone thinks doesn't deserve to get in often makes a run. So we'll see if the committee did a good job or not. I have no problem with a defending recent national champ getting a little bit of a bump over somebody else. I don't think they say they do that, but I don't have a problem if they do. And let's not fool ourselves, guys. We've known this for years now. They all claim they want Cinderella stories in these mid-majors, but they don't. And less of them are getting in than ever, and they match them up against each other by the round of 32 so that one of them cannot advance mathematically. And this is more of a sign of that. So it's not a surprise. But, yeah, I will say this, Mark. You were 10 they don't deserve to be in. I looked the other week. I haven't updated the number, but I think they were 1-9 like a couple weeks ago against like Class A Tier 1 teams. So
1-12, Steve. 1-12
yeah.
against quad one opponents.
Is that what it turned out to be? I mean, yeah, they're not going to last long, but they got a favorable matchup. But it's a play-in game, right? It's the first four.
Right.
And think of it this way, too, guys. If you want interest in the first four game, put a blue blood in it, right? It's probably not a bad strategy.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, TV. Remember, this is still a TV event among all things, right? So a lot of these matchups and a lot of these teams that may get in have a lot to do with their ability to draw numbers, eyeballs onto TV sets.
Of course, guys, these first four matchups do matter. I believe there's only been one, maybe two times since they did this first four thing where one of those teams from that group have not won, not just once, but twice, making the round of 32. So history suggests one of these two teams makes, one of those four teams, I should say, makes the round of 32. And I'll say this about North Carolina, okay? You talk about the 1-12 in quad one games. Yeah, that looks bad. Ken Palm has them at number 33. That's 2 spots above UConn, okay? That's 5 spots above Creighton. So they have some respect still by the metrics, I guess. There is another situation developing here as we look at the South region. I'll bring Adam Trigger in for this since it involves a lower-seeded team, and no one follows the lower-seeded teams more than my man Trig. UC San Diego, a 12 seed. This will be the trendiest team over the next 3 days. Everyone is going to tell you how much they love UC San Diego, whether or not they've actually watched UC San Diego play. Michigan, thanks for winning the Big Ten tournament, I guess, because your prize in the 5-12 matchup is drawing what I think everyone believes is the best true mid-major in this thing, Trig.
Game. Yeah, I mean, it could be a great game. UC San Diego's been awesome, but they're going to have to deal with a pick and roll that they probably haven't seen a pick and roll of that caliber in the Big West this season. You know, Dusty Mays really, that pick and roll offense is awesome. And it was just on display all weekend in the Big Ten tournament. So I don't know, though. I'm trying to run numbers like as we're doing these right here. This is my numbers are coming out kind of close to a pick here. I'm just going to say that. Like,
Yeah.
I got to go and like obviously tweak them and dig in a little bit, but yeah, like this is I don't know. It's probably going to be a pretty good game. But I do agree with you. It's going to be very trendy. Everyone's going to love UC San Diego here. That's for sure.
Zeno, what? We saw the opener, Michigan -2, only against UC San Diego, obviously being a 5 versus 12 matchup. Historically, we see upsets in that part of the draw. So I'm sure right now that everyone is predicting UC
I'm seeing
San
opening
Diego
lines at 3.5 right now for Michigan. Look, I mean, I would be curious to know if Michigan had lost the game today to Wisconsin, in which Wisconsin had an all-time terrible shooting performance, where they would be seated and if they would be in the same matchup, right? Like, that's sort of the minutia of this whole thing that really boils down to it. You can wear that stupid Michigan shirt, by the way, jacket. And you're only doing it to piss me off because you knew I was in Wisconsin today, so you can bite me for that.
Oh, this was a totally random thing. I just grabbed the first thing
It was
off
a
the
real
hanger.
jerk move. I literally texted you, okay, this morning about Wisconsin, and you wore that stupid jacket right here just to piss me off, and it worked. Shot
Dog's
22%.
upset.
You should be embarrassed, Wisconsin. God, terrible. Anyway, moving on.
You see Rob Veno joining us on the main screen
Yes.
here. Rob,
Make fun of the stupid jacket too, Rob.
no, Rob's not going to make fun of this guy. Rob and I are very good friends, as a matter of fact. So there you go. I bet you Rob's on my side, as a matter of fact.
Rob's the poor sucker who is your only friend. I'm not friends with you after what you're wearing right now.
Would you like me to disrobe? I need to have my attire approved here before I go on the program with you. Is
Get to
what we're
Rob.
gonna do?
You got to be more intelligent than more intelligent.
All right. Guys, your thoughts here on the South region. We'll be moving brackets here shortly, guys, but the South region was the first one released. Anything you'd like to add here on this 5-12 matchup between Michigan, UC San Diego, North Carolina getting in? Is there another matchup? And by the way, San Diego State's playing North Carolina. Do we want to talk about them at all here?
Yeah, I'll say this real quick, guys. Adding to what Trigg said earlier, San Diego deal with a pick and roll, deal with 2 7-footers when your tallest guy is 6'8" in the starting lineup. I mean, that's something you don't see in the Big West all that often. So they did go to Utah State this year, +10, win that game. I think that's when they weren't so highly power rated. Now they are. To me, that line of 3.5, that's a little bit crazy. I know there's always a 5-12 upset, but go ahead, Adam.
My gut says, Rob, I think you're going to get a better line than that if you like Michigan. I feel like UC San Diego's taking money at 3.5. Like I honestly think this trends back toward Brian said 2, maybe it opened somewhere. I think this is going to trend back toward that. I feel like this is going to go off like 2.5, something like that. I really think UC San Diego's that good. And to Brian's point, people are going to bet this team getting a couple points. Like no one's betting Michigan here. That's my gut.
And the more they hear about it, guys, the more they hear about it and the more they read about it, the more they will bet it, right? There's 4 days to go here. I'll say this real quick, Brian, about that region as well.
First 4, Rob. That'll be, there's not 4 days for this. Is Michigan?
No, we're talking
about Michigan, San Diego.
No, we're talking about Michigan, UC San Diego.
Yeah, they're a Thursday game, I think. But real quick in that region, guys, it's interesting to me that Louisville gets to play in Lexington. And that arena will be jammed. Creighton probably travels, but they don't travel up the road like Louisville to Lexington, so that could be a little bit of an edge for them. The North Carolina thing, hey, we'll see if Texas gets in, because if Texas doesn't, they'll be the team that bitches the loudest.
Texas just got in. They're playing Xavier in the play-in round again, and then face Illinois. It just popped in the
Xavier's
Midwest.
I'll tell you what.
too.
They'll let anybody in this damn thing. Like, I mean,
They're going to let 72 teams in.
Who got left out?
Who got
left out is what we need to know.
Well, I think Indiana right now is probably sweating. And I'll be honest with you guys. They were talking all day like Indiana was a formality. I didn't understand that at all. The Indiana Hoosiers stink. I didn't think that they necessarily deserve to be in the field of 68 as a guarantee.
Texas is 7-10 against quad 1 opponents. You ready for this? They're 3-5 against quad 2 opponents. They can't even beat bad teams. Like,
Yeah, and
6-10 in conference? Stop it. It's a joke. Or 6-12, rather. This is a joke. This is not a tournament team.
Hey, Brian, I got to jump in. They showed this a minute ago. Gonzaga just got the 8th seed and has to play Georgia, and they will play the winner. They'll play Houston after that. Right now in the Ken Palms, Gonzaga is the 9th overall team in the country. In the net ratings, if what I'm looking at is accurate in the net rating, they're the 8th team in the net ratings, and they're an 8th seed. This is insane. I mean, I know they haven't been ranked because I do my top 25 video. They've been in the 30s all year, but they've been like a top 10 net ranked team. I mean, they're showing it right now, the Midwest region. Number 8 seed Gonzaga, and then they get Houston on top of that if they get by Georgia. So shocked by that.
3 or 4 in that matchup, right? Like Georgia's not
I haven't
favorite.
seen it.
4.5.
Georgia won't be the favorite. Georgia's the 9th seed anyway.
4.5.
Gonzaga's 4.5. But I'm just saying, I mean, you talk about a vastly underseeded team. That's just insane to me. I thought Gonzaga could be a little bit of a sleeper coming into the tournament.
I thought Louisville at 8 was also way underseeded. I mean, they just played in the ACC final for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I got to be honest.
And if North Carolina gets in, you'd think they would like Louisville more to that point,
And Creighton's a 9, Mark. To your point, Creighton just played St. John's in the Big East final.
I mean, this whole thing is this committee needs to be
guys, something to keep an eye on.
Why do you guys care, though? Why does anyone give a shit? Like, we're just here to bet these games. Why do you care?
Attach lines to them. Right? Just throw 2 teams.
Who the hell cares? Like, just give us teams so we can give us teams so we can bet them. Like, who cares? Like, I just want to know like what you make the number and like what you're looking. You know what I mean?
And Trigger just burnt it early.
All right. We used to get 3.5 on my other show. We're down to 1 F-bomb a show. We used to get 3.5.
One F-bomb.
Trimming it down.
Family program.
Hey, guys, on a serious note, though, with these 10 and 12 bid conferences now, you got to remember they've got the stipulations where they have to pot them in locales, and they can't have conference opponents play each other in the first round. And if you've played more than once, you can't even play in the second round. So if you've only played once, you can play in the round of 32. So we're going to see that more than ever. But you're going to have some wacky seeds because of that. So people that use all their historical back testing based on seeding, I think is going to go out the window. That's the one thing I will say about it from a handicapping perspective.
A couple things here. Number one, I think Michigan being a 5 and still winning the Big Ten tournament. I think the committee just had him as a 5 and just didn't move him after that game. That's my opinion right there.
Brian,
Louisville.
I want to say something about this.
I want to say
before you move on from Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to talk about Louisville because Rob mentioned them being in Lexington so close. Remember, they're going to play a number 1 seed close to home in the second round. We're all talking about this Creighton matchup. Okay, that's a home court edge for Louisville, but they get a number 1 seed pretty close to their backyard. I think that's fairly significant here looking at the South region trick.
Yeah, I mean, those are really important points, right? Like where some of these games are located, and that's what I'm trying to, as this bracket is released, like that's what you gotta. It is important in my opinion. Like, where are you headed? Some of these fan bases, how do they travel? Like, I'll be Brian. I was telling you off air. I guarantee you those New Mexico fans show up in Cleveland. That's as passionate of a fan base as I've encountered yet. Like the New Mexico fans will take over that arena. That they're going to travel like crazy. Like they're going to roll in there. They'll have more fans than Marquette there. That's my gut.
Marquette's been a corpse down the stretch too, Zeno.
I would like to respond to Adam Trigger and his potty mouth about who's in this tournament and who's not. Okay. Yes, it does matter who's in because even from a betting
sports, you're not Dick Vitale on an after show.
Is this what it's like when you talk to me, VP, and I always interrupt you? Is this what it's like? Okay, because I'm trying to finish my.
Not even going to get into that.
Go ahead.
Hang on, Steve Merril. I'll get to you. I promise.
It does matter.
Who said something? What?
Lines would be different against different teams, and there are favorable advantages depending on who is in this thing. Furthermore, I'll just say this much. I'm pissed because the Johnnies just got screwed. They're putting them in the bracket with Florida, which is complete BS. That's good. What the final bracket.
Trigger sounded a lot like Teddy Covers. I didn't know Adam was aging that fast about it doesn't matter who's in the tournament. It can't be a sports fan if you're a handicapper. Adam's like the biggest sports fan I know that's a handicapper. He goes to like 100 games a year. So he's the last person I thought that wouldn't find that interesting.
Yeah, but this is like a sports betting show.
I just want to make one more point here about teams, where they're going and how close to them in proximity it could be. I heard a little mention of VCU, but they play BYU in Denver. BYU is going to load up that arena for sure.
And they're also,
I don't know how
altitude also.
They're used to playing at elevation.
Yeah, the altitude is going to be a big difference there.
And Mark, for your beloved Wisconsin Badgers, they're going to play in Denver, but Montana is their opponent. So for Montana, it's a real quick trip down.
Yeah.
So maybe Montana.
And Wisconsin goes home quickly. 22%. Texas Tech, you can go home too. Okay, while we're at it.
And not only that, Wisconsin doesn't play slow anymore, and they're going to have to play after just going all the way to the finals on a short week. So that elevation, I think, is a legit factor.
Like that's going to be a tough matchup. I mean, Wisconsin's great on the perimeter, but you know how these matchups always go when they put them together. Whatever one team does well, they find the other team that defends it well. Or if you got a fast team, they play against a slow team. It's
right.
They purposely set this stuff up that way for styles make fights in the first round to go along here. So, I think when you look at it, though, you start to see how some of these things are going to unfold here. And I'm just looking necessarily right now because the entire world looks at the 5-12 matchups, right? We talked about Michigan, UC San Diego. You got Oregon going against Liberty, which feels like the Fiesta Bowl, but different. And then Clemson probably gets a favor done for them against McNeese State. We know the 5-12 upset happens. I don't think McNeese is beating Clemson. I think Clemson is
Clemson's my sleeper. I know Brian likes them as well, Brian. I heard you say that the other week as well.
To get through there. Unfortunately, they would have to get to Houston to do it, get through Houston to do it. I feel like they might match up better if they were on the bottom.
That's a great matchup for them, though, Mark. That's your slow versus slow, right there. No. So the committee can't avoid that one. No. Yeah, I think Clemson's dangerous. Brunell's as good as anybody. Took them to the Elite Eight last year, and they're a better team this year. And they've got all the metrics of teams that can make the run. Houston does as well. But as we know, Houston always seems to come up short every year. Clemson would be the type of team that could get them. I didn't realize they were matched up, so that's very interesting. But once again, Gonzaga might get Houston in the second round. That'll be fast versus slow, which probably isn't great for the Zags. But they've played St. Mary's, 3 times in the last couple months. Be interesting.
By the way, the final West region is coming out. You get Florida versus Norfolk State in the first round. Expect about 244 points to be scored in that game.
And Norfolk State just played their tournament this weekend, by the way, as a mid-major. They didn't play a week earlier like all the other baby boys, and they just made it in.
Because for a team that's the only team in that conference that's in the top 150 in offense in KenPom, they had a really bad offensive tournament. They did not score a lot of points at all, which was really interesting. But still, the way Florida plays and the pace that they play at, I could see that game going way over the total.
Yeah, there's some veteran guys on the Norfolk State team that can score, and they can score on their own. Like they don't. It's like they're good, tough shot makers, and they're very well coached. I mean, their coach has been there for a long time.
That line just popped up. Florida minus 26.5. Can I take Norfolk State at plus 26.5?
Yeah, and Florida just won the title game on Sunday in the toughest conference tournament in the history of mankind. That's tough. It's definitely tough.
Listen, Norfolk State played a handful of power conference schools this year. And I know they played Baylor really tough. That final score ended up getting out into the 20, 25 point range, but I want to say they were tied at half. I think one of their kind of upperclassmen ended up having a huge game against Tennessee. So it's they've definitely, they had to go and play a handful of bye games. They've seen teams like Florida, or I'm not saying they're going to beat a team like Florida, but they definitely could hang around. That profiles as a game that, a team that could hang around, maybe has no chance to win, but could keep it within 20.
You know what?
And you're talking about getting 26,
You know what
27.
I do in these spots, Bryan Power, tell everybody what I do in a spot like this. Norfolk State versus Florida.
You would cut the game in half because they're not covering early. They're not covering late. Absolutely.
So if they ain't covering early, they ain't covering late. Florida will run away at the end and just put too much pressure on them. But I could see Norfolk State, getting hot early, shooting, making shots here, and keeping this thing within 2 touchdowns for the first 20 minutes before Florida pulls away late. But, there's not a world where Florida is winning by 18 at half, and then all of a sudden Norfolk comes charging back in to cover this thing without it being within 30, right? I just don't see that game script developing. Norfolk State will probably make my card. I can tell you that already.
Lost by 18 to Grand Canyon. They lost by 15 to Tennessee. And as Adam said, they lost by 25 to Baylor, but they're only down by about an average of 7 points.
By 5 at half, I think it was.
Average deficit was 7 points in that game, so it wasn't too bad.
the Baylor game, they were leading very close to halftime. I feel like it was I think this number should be closer to 20.
Yes.
I got this closer to 20.
I bet them against Tennessee when they were getting like 33 and a half. And it was the easiest money I made all season long. But again, I mean, this is, I'll throw it out there now. I mean, Norfolk State, there's no reason not for them to make the card. Oh my God, St. John's got Omaha in the first round.
Florida's winning. What do you think about that, Zeno? I think they're going to beat Norfolk State in advance. Thoughts?
So it's
I played the money line. Go ahead, knock yourself out.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Give it up. All right, let's look big picture, guys. All right, South region is the one we started with. Auburn, the number 1 seed. Michigan State, the 2. Iowa State, the 3. Texas A&M, the 4. Michigan, the 5. Steve Merril, predict me a winner in the South region. I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Who do you think comes out of that region?
I didn't listen to the first 4 teams you mentioned. Who's in it again? Just run them real quick for me. I don't know my regions yet.
Auburn.
Michigan. I'm not picking Michigan, so give me the other 4.
No, Auburn, Michigan State, Iowa State, Texas A&M are your top 4 seeds.
All right, so once again, I'm going to have a lot of videos and stuff on this week on, kind of the metrics it takes to win. I did a little shorthand. I've got it on the back of an envelope here somewhere from last week. I had 8 teams last week, Brian, going into the tournament that I thought had all those metrics. Clemson was one of them, as I mentioned. Duke was one before Flag got injured. Michigan State is on my list. They're one of only 8. I did not have Iowa State on that list. Auburn's on it as well. So it's either Auburn or Michigan State. I think Auburn and Duke were the 2 best teams in the country this year. Obviously, without Cooper Flag, or if he's available, we'll have to see. But yeah, I think if it's not Auburn, it's going to be Michigan State in that region.
Veno, how about your thoughts on that? Who are you looking at? Auburn, obviously it was a formality that they were number 1 seed, didn't even win the SEC tournament, didn't even make it to the conference tournament final. Is it Auburn or Michigan State obviously was as hot as anybody in the country until they lost to Wisconsin in the Big Ten semifinal. Who are you looking at here in this region? And then we'll move on to a different region, guys.
Well, I'll say this. If we watch Bruce Pearl after the game, he's certainly not worried about losing the Southeast Conference tournament. So he seems to think they're in good shape. I would say this, if Lipsy comes back for Iowa State, let's not count them out. Iowa State's as good as the 2 teams ahead of them. Iowa State played Auburn early, I think way back at tournament time in December, and had them for a lot of that game, wound up losing. Auburn made a big comeback in that game, if I remember right. It was around holiday time. So Iowa State probably can't be overlooked there. But, looking at the rest of that field, we already talked about the Louisville situation where perhaps they get a shot at Auburn and Lexington. Michigan, UC San Diego, we talked about. I would say, if you're looking for a sleeper out of there, and 3 is not necessarily a sleeper, but Iowa State might be the least talked about team of the top 3 inside that region. And real quick, Brian, I want to make a quick point about what everybody was talking about with Clemson and McNeese, and then hopped in with Norfolk and who they played and how they played them really good. Listen, I've defended McNeese State a little bit here. McNeese State went to Alabama and lost 72-64 as a 17.5-point dog. You hold Alabama to 72, you're doing something right. They played Mississippi State. They only lost by 3. That's 2 SEC teams that are in the tournament that they covered rather easily. And, of course, they're led by our favorite FBI wiretap coach, Will Wade, who would love to go ahead and get something done here in this tournament. So it's a team that had 5 guys last year that made the tourney. They got smoked by Gonzaga first round, but they added 4 transfers. I'd say they got a shot against Clemson, but we'll see. I just want to point out that they've got some stuff in there on their ledger. Their conference stinks, so they had to go play some decent non-conference games, a lot of mid-majors, but the Alabama-Mississippi State games stick out to me.
I got to throw something out about
what we're looking at here. Go ahead.
I'm going to listen. Someone said Michigan State. Don't sleep on Bryant being a very tough opponent, matchup type opponent in that game. And I'll tell you why. Now, listen, I'm not saying don't take this like I'm telling you to bet Bryant. Okay. I'm not saying I dislike it, but I've watched this team a lot and they're very they're a tricky team to if you don't know what you're getting into with them. They play super fast. They have some size and they're really good at contesting shots. Defensively, they rate out in the top 100 nationally. They have some offense. The key for them is not turning it over. So it's like, I'll reference a game from earlier this year. They played St. John's. I believe they covered. It came out really close to the number. But for long stretches, they were like right on par with St. John's. They've got veterans. Earl Timberlake's a great player. I mean, they have veteran guards that have been there for a long time. And they play one of the fastest tempos in the country. So let's say this is an early game and like suddenly Michigan's just like not into it yet. They could find themselves down 15 against that type of team. Now, if they're turning the ball over and stuff, like it could get ugly. But if they're not, like that's a crazy game with like high amount of variance, I think. Like Bryant on their best day can beat Michigan State. They definitely can.
Bryant does not turn the ball over, but the problem is they don't shoot the three well. That's my concern.
Well, here's what I was going to say.
No one makes threes against
Michigan
State.
I would put Michigan State on loss alert in round 2 against New Mexico. Like I think that's a Look at New Mexico and the way they play.
Donovan Dent.
The only difference between New Mexico and St. John's is that New Mexico makes threes on a regular basis and St. John's doesn't. If Pitino's running the same exact game and the same exact style, it could be a real problem for Michigan State.
Brian, to your point, though, you're right. This is not as good of a three-point shooting team as Bryant has had in years past, but they're very, very good rebounding the ball. Their rebounding numbers are as good as any mid to small major team that you're going to find nationally. You won't find many teams better than that have better rebounding numbers than Bryant. Withers is a great defensive player and he's got size. This is from a league up here in the Northeast, so I watch this team play. I've watched them play for years. Phil Martelli Jr., their head coach, has done a great job since Jared Grasso's gotten fired. When he got fired, he kind of picked up right where he left off. I always thought Grasso would win a tournament game because he was really building something there. Martelli Jr.'s picked it up. I don't know if they'll win this game. Obviously, that's kind of a crazy call. 18.5-point underdog, I think they are right now. But they have the mix to give Michigan State a hard time if they play their best game. Like, there's not many teams you can say that about in the 215 where it's like, if this team plays their best game, they can win. On Bryant's best day, they can 100% beat Michigan State. I'm confident in saying that.
Trig, he knows the Northeast and he knows these lower seeded teams. We now have, by the way, lines for every first round matchup. We can start breaking that down if you'd like. Guys, Zeno, did you have something else you wanted to say, it sounded like, before we
I'm just kind of looking. I'm looking at paths here. I know Trig doesn't care who's in, but when I look at the 1 and the 2 seeds, look, we only care about the betting. We don't really care about filling out brackets per se, but at least, there's a certain sort of methodology to some of this.
Brackets.
Yeah, I don't care about filling out brackets either, but
the third is here now.
No, it's not even about filling out brackets, Steve. It's just like, I'm looking at paths and eventual matchups and things of that nature. Like when I look at 1 and 2 seeds to get to their regional final, right, for a chance to play in the Elite Eight and go to the Final Four, I think Tennessee got the best draw out of anybody. I really, really do. Like their second round matchup, they should easily be able to beat UCLA and Utah State. And if they get Kentucky again, they already know them in the Sweet 16 round. Like that they have a very clear path to me to the regional final, Tennessee. I think that they were rewarded for, getting to their conference final in doing so. But I look at some of these other seeds, like I think Michigan State could be on upset alert. I think Bama is the same. And while I would put St. John's right in the regional final, I don't think that they match up well with Florida. So I was just kind of looking at 1 and 2 seeds going across the board.
Obviously, since we don't care about brackets, Zeno has established that. We care about betting these individual games. Some live dogs that have caught my eyes, guys. Drake plus 5.5 against Missouri. This is a Drake team. Trig, remind me, everybody loved Drake last year.
Everybody loves the Drake. Remind you from Seinfeld. Everybody loves the Drake.
And then I'll throw another one at you. Yale, the Ivy League champions. This is a team that if they get hot from 3, they pulled an upset last year in the first. Auburn.
They don't defend. They don't defend enough.
But here's the problem.
I can't sign off on Yale.
Here's the problem.
Go ahead.
Texas A&M. What do they not do? They don't hit threes. That is the math. 3 is greater than 2. At least that's what they told me at Ohio University. Yes. Yale with the threes. I think they are live to maybe give A&M a scare there Because A&M, they can go as cold as any top team in this tournament in the top 4.
That's true. That's true, but A&M's not worried about going cold. A&M wants to just throw everything at the rim. They don't mind missing a shot. They'll go get the rebound. And that's where, like, you got to remember, this is a Yale team last year. Of course, we remember Yale from last year. They got the big win, but that team had Danny Wolf. It had Matt Noling. It had August Mahoney, who was their heart and soul. He graduated. So, yes, you still have guys. You still have Mbang. You still have Polidakis. Like, there's still some players left over from that team. But I got to be honest. I didn't think Yale was going to be this good this year, and I think they took advantage of an Ivy League that's nothing compared to what it was the last couple of years. You have, now you have Brian Earl down killing it for Steve Merril and William and Mary. Yeah, Cornell was still okay, but they were okay because they ran out all of these. Like, Dartmouth finished 3rd in this league this year. Princeton was a disaster, so much worse than they were supposed to be. Rubio De La Rosa hurt for a lot of the year for Columbia. They ended up being terrible. Penn ended up being terrible. Harvard was terrible. So I can't get down with Yale this year. I think they're just going to get abused on the inside by that team. They really let Cornell back in the game today. They could have lost to Princeton. So you are right to an extent, Brian. Like, you are right to an extent. Like, Texas A&M doesn't shoot it particularly well, but I just don't know that Yale can, like, bang with them on the inside and get rebounds. Like, so it feels like a game where Texas A&M could really beat them inside. And I don't trust this Yale team like I did last year when they had Wolf and Noling and Polidakis. Like, again, he was still big for them last year, but can he knock off a power conference school by himself? Probably not. That's my gut with that team.
BP, I can't believe you missed this one. Let me see. Hold on. Did you see the Kansas-Arkansas line? Did anybody see this number that popped up on the WagerTalk odds screen? Is that an insane number?
Well, you hate John. 5.5? Well, you hate John Calipari. I figured you would be in.
Hold on a second. DraftKings says Kansas opening as minus 10.5.
It's
5.5 right now.
I'm showing 5.5
at DraftKings right now.
Yeah, I think
I'm looking at the WagerTalk odds screen, unless that's wrong.
Yeah,
that's why
I've got the DraftKings site open. It's 5.5 Kansas at DraftKings.
Thank you. I'm like, what? I'm going to screenshot this. I'm going to show everyone. I'm taking a picture with my phone. This is ridiculous.
I'm looking at the comment section. My main man Clint is in the comment section. Clint, oh no, he likes BYU against VCU. Steve Merril, that's your neck of the woods. I think VCU is a dangerous team. That was a rock fight against George Mason and the father. My God, that was an ugly. Those teams were trading hands half the time in that game. It was an ugly one. VCU, Steve, I did a video with our good friend Kelly Stewart. I said VCU is the kind of team that I look for, a double-digit seed that could win maybe not 1, but 2 games in this thing. Do you have any thoughts on that game? I think VCU is going to be another trendy dog, personally.
Yeah, a couple things I want to mention on these teams that can pull upsets, and we'll go back to Drake real quick. Drake plays at the slowest pace of all 364 Division I teams this year. That is dangerous on any given game, and Missouri's more up-tempo. So Drake is a team that could go very far or be out early, but that dreaded half-court pace, especially in the round of 32 of the Saturday-Sunday games, we only have 1 day of prep. So if Drake gets by Missouri, they definitely could be a sleeper for the Sweet 16 because of that matchup style. The other thing that gives you a chance, regardless who you are, is something that VCU has going for them, Brian, is that they take a lot of three-pointers. They're top 25 in the country in three-point rate. They take almost half their shots from three-point range. So once again, they can lose on any given night, but they also beat anybody on any given night when the threes are falling. So, once again, a lot of random variants, but VCU is definitely live in any game because of that. I think Drake is as well because of their slow half-court pace.
Here's the thing, though. I mean, look, I thought long and hard. Now, somebody who backed BYU in a lot of situations this year, they are a completely different shooting team at home than they are on the road.
Sure.
That said, I think them playing at elevation actually is a major advantage to them as opposed to them going somewhere else and playing at a lower level. I think they're going to have a decided advantage against VCU because they're used to being up there and VCU is not. And with a short number like with a short number like 3.5, it would be hard for me to lay off BYU in this spot. It really would.
But once again, Mark, I think that altitude edge is even more pronounced when you have 1 day off in the round of 32 on Saturday. So if BYU gets by VCU, I think that edge is even bigger if they're playing a non-altitude team on Saturday or Sunday. One thing I'll say about BYU is they give up a lot of 3-point shots. That's their
Well,
one
the
weakness.
defense is a problem.
And their 3-point D is below average. So it's going to come down to threes. And if you know, it's like NFL games, right? If you can give me the turnover margin, we're going to know the winners, right? So if you give me the 3-point margin.
If that total is accurate on the WagerTalk odds screen, I'm seeing 142.5. That is an easy over.
Well, once again, it's going to come down to the threes, though.
143.5.
And, you know, does the altitude hurt VCU shooting or their defense more in the second half? But I agree with you, Mark. I think with all these altitude teams, you have to be very careful in these road games, these neutral sites, because their overall records are inflated because teams don't play as well when they play them on their altitude court. Obviously, that doesn't apply as much here in this location, but that's a lot of reasons people think BYU might be a little bit phony going further in the tournament.
Yeah,
and
guys,
VCU is going to slow that game down.
Let me just real quick. I'll side with Mark on this because from what we just saw out of BYU, this is an 11-man rotation, and not that an 11-man rotation means a lot when you have 4-minute timeouts, TV. We know how this goes. But BYU in altitude with 11 guys that he's now running out there on the floor in altitude could grind VCU down. I think VCU could be in this a little bit, but in the end, that BYU offense had clicked. I think I had 17 of 20 games before they played Houston the other day where they had scored like 70 plus. And VCU's defense is not Houston, so I would have to side with BYU there. Just a deeper team, and the altitude helps, and they're just a better offensive team.
Yeah, from a pace standpoint, though. Yeah, well, from a pace standpoint, like VCU's probably going to try to slow that game down considerably. Like they've done that at times this year. Like I feel like they sort of, you know, they kind of fall into the very similar tempo like profile as BYU. Like I feel like most analytics sites have them between 150 and 200 nationally, but I feel like VCU's been more like, especially when they're in the game like this, I feel like they tend to slow it down a little bit more, and it kind of make, you know, just again, I'm just saying that because we brought the total up. I don't think VCU is going to try to get into a track meet with this BYU team. I don't think that benefits them at all. So now VCU's defense can be pretty solid. Like that's a team that can be pretty good on the defensive end. But what you also have to ask yourself is like the Atlantic 10 was not, you know, great this year. They had some good teams, really no other, like Dayton was down this year. I felt like St. Joe's never really panned out. So you're getting this team that just ran through the Atlantic 10 conference. And then you kind of look back and you say, well, there really was like there was many okay teams, not many great teams. George Mason, I guess, was pretty good. But again, like when was the last time the A-10 didn't get 2 teams into the NCAA tournament? Long time ago. I can't remember. When were they a 1-bid lead? Previous than this. So it's an interesting game. I think you're definitely going to get forced to pay. What is this number, like 3.5? That's definitely forcing you to pay the altitude tax with BYU and Denver. I got this closer to a pick on a neutral, but I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong for doing that.
No, and real quick, just to end this real quick, guys, VCU's been an underdog twice this year. Both times it was to Mountain West teams. Both times they didn't cover. 0-2 ATS. They lost to New Mexico by 7. They lost to Nevada on the neutral.
Get BYU.
So they're playing another Mountain West team.
That's probably the way to go.
I don't know. Guys, I have circled. This is a very interesting line that we need to talk about because Memphis, who was the AAC tournament, just ended right before.
Just tell everybody before you start you hate Memphis. You hate Memphis.
I think they're very open. I think they're poorly coached and they turn the ball over a lot, okay? Well, and guess who else doesn't believe in the Memphis Tigers? Apparently the odds makers, because despite the fact that this team just won its conference tournament, okay, and they're a 5 seed, they are an underdog to 12 seed Colorado State. You talk about a hot team, guys. Colorado State, I believe, has the winners of the Mountain West tournament. I believe they've now won and covered 8 consecutive games. So I don't have this in front of me right now, but historically speaking, Steve Merril, I do believe when the 12 seed is favored over a 5 seed, that has been a siren, if you will, to take the 12 seed in that particular instance. And so we have one of those. It doesn't happen all the time. But Colorado State, guys, yes, a 12 seed laying 2.5 to 5 seed Memphis.
Yeah, they're showing right now actually the results since 2018 of all the different seeds into fives are 16 and 8. So it's been coming back down to earth recently, but it still does seem to happen every year. They also did something very interesting. I remember them doing this last year, guys, or years past. They had the overall seeding for every team in the bracket, but it's all crap. I was waiting to see what Gonzaga was. They have Gonzaga 30th overall, and they're 8th and 9th in the Ken Palms and the net ratings. But your Memphis Tigers were 20th overall as a 5 seed. So basically, they made it match whatever seed they gave them. It's all, crap. I don't think they even believe those are really the overall metrics. But I agree. I think Memphis is a team, if you look at more of the serious power ratings and whatnot, are not even a top 25, top 30 program. I'm not sure I'm in love with Colorado State, though, but I don't think either one of them are going too far.
I mean, I got something to say right now. They're 51 in Ken Palm, Memphis is.
But they're 20th in the NCAA tournament's overall ranking. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, they'll have to have Tyrese Hunter too, guys. I mean, he didn't play today, the point for Memphis. I mean, if he's not around, Colorado State, Brian, to your numbers, 10-0 last 10 games and 9-2 to the over. That's a really good. That was the best shooting team in the Mountain West all season long. They actually won their first Mountain West title since 2003 when they won it this weekend. So, Nico Medved and that squad, that's not a team to mess around with. I could see them. You have to handle the boards against Dane Danger and those guys. But otherwise, I think Colorado State, maybe they are the better team. Maybe they should be favored.
Well, Trig, you mentioned the A10. Trig, you mentioned the A10. Being a one-bid league this year. The American's just a one-bid league this year. So what do we? That's another kind of knock in the Memphis profile, right? They were clearly the best team in that conference, but I mean, the metrics here, the spreadsheets, the stat nerds, if you will, that they kind of feel differently about this Memphis Tigers team.
Yeah, that's not totally fair because the A10 didn't get all their top teams poached. The American got all their top teams poached by other leagues. So it's it's just a different league entirely now. That being said, I haven't combed through the bracket yet. I don't know that you'll find a bigger coaching mismatch in the whole tournament. Like Nico Medved is just a significantly better coach in a game, like in game, than Penny Hardaway is. I actually think Nico Medved's one of the top 5 coaches in college basketball right now. If you look at this team he had no business being this good with this team. That this team should not have been this good.
You know this as well as anyone. You talk about a team that was picked over by imagine if Colorado State had Tajay. I mean, this team was as picked over as any in the country, and here they are.
I mean, Nate Clifford is an NBA talent, but the rest of this roster is not very good. And without an elite coach, this Colorado State team is not here right now. I do think you have to point that out, right? Like Memphis can be game planned for. I was on UAB today. I ended up on the wrong side of that one, but that was more because UAB went 1 for $1 million from 3 in the second half. I don't necessarily think Memphis really outplayed them until they just started missing everything. And really, like what Memphis does, very sloppy with the basketball at times. Colorado State is playing so good right now. Like the only thing that concerns me with that is like they just won their conference tournament. They kind of like went max effort down the stretch. Then they get a couple days off and show up and forget how to make a shot. But you still have Nate Clifford. He's a superstar. He kind of feels like the type of guy that's playing another couple games in the NCAA tournament.
As
I was watching Memphis, I was going to say, Zeno, as I was watching Memphis, Dane Danger was terrible from the free throw line today. Terrible. And that's been a problem for him. I know how you like to shout from the rooftops, make your free throws. Memphis.
Shout it from the rooftops. When you got a good record, shout it from the rooftops.
All right. Okay. Yes. We're not going to get into that right now, but we are going to get into
He's not the only one.
Hey, Brian, let me hijack real
both
quick.
their bigs are bad free throw shooters.
I've got breaking news for everybody, and this is what I've been waiting for the past hour, is that the in-house guys at CBS just made their Final Four picks, including Seth Davis. And both Seth Davis and Clark Kellogg have Michigan State in the Final Four. So that's not a slam dunk for Auburn to get back to your initial question on that. And then Jay Wright has Auburn in the finals, and I do respect Jay Wright, actually, of the three of them. And Clark Kellogg had Clemson losing in the finals to Florida. Seth Davis had Florida losing in the finals. So be wary of Florida. Maybe Clemson isn't as much of a sleeper as you and I think.
I hope you're right.
Auburn might have more value than
St. John's has to get through. I don't like St. John's matchup with Florida at all. They're too long, too athletic for St. John's. It's not a great matchup. I wish St. John's was in the Houston bracket, but that's a whole different conversation. I wanted to bring up one thing real quick in reference to when we look at these 8-9 and 7-10 games, which, to the public, these are two equitable teams, right, because of where they're seated. But then you start to see the gap in the metrics, and Vanderbilt and St. Mary's becomes another one here. Where you're looking at a St. Mary's team that's 22nd in Ken Palm overall. Vanderbilt's all the way down at 49th, and it's similar over in net ranking as well, where Vanderbilt is 48th and St. Mary's is 21st. And you're only seeing a 4-point spread there. Now it looks like it's 4.5 moving to 5 at certain places as the lines start to populate here. But that seems like another advantage. The hard thing with St. Mary's is because of their pace and they play so slow and, their defensive prowess is typically low scoring that, the game generally could stay tighter. But there's a pretty big gap there, BP, in the metrics and rankings between those two teams.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, St. Mary's is a team that obviously beat Gonzaga twice in the regular season, fell to them in the WCC tournament final. We know how St. Mary's likes to play as well. Guys, there is a team we have not mentioned here yet, and I find it very interesting we have not mentioned this team because they won the national championship each of the last 2 seasons. That would be Dan Hurley, who I believe behaves like a complete buffoon. His UConn Huskies, only a 4.5-point favorite over Oklahoma.
Oklahoma sucks. They don't even belong in this tournament.
I don't think Oklahoma's a good team personally. So, to Rob Veno, what do you think about the 2-time national defending champs only laying 4.5 to an Oklahoma team that, in Zeno's words, isn't very good? I mean, are they going to be a public? Do we think UConn is going to be a public favorite in that situation?
Well, I think a bulk of what we've talked about tonight shows how much love the SEC has gotten. I know Georgia was mentioned as being, Vanderbilt was just mentioned as maybe being, and to Mark's point, Vanderbilt's the worst. They were the worst defensive efficiency team in the SEC this year, playing against St. Mary's. So there's a disparity there. And I know the league is better, but Vandy, I'm not so sure. Same with Oklahoma. They have trouble on the boards. The way Taurus Reed came on at the end of the season for UConn gave him a couple of bigs. If Hurley doesn't have a coronary on the sidelines, and it hurts me, Brian, because obviously growing up there, my first 31 years, the UConn Huskies are close to me. I'm close to the program, and I wish he wouldn't act like a fool, but he can't help himself. He's a chip off the old block with his dad. But I think they're probably going to be primed and ready. You give him 4 days to get ready, and I think he can do the right thing. I'll say this. Your head coach at Oklahoma now, you think you'd rather be the head coach at Loyola nowadays because Oklahoma is just not really good. Fantastic freshman, but overall not a good defensive team, overall not a good rebounding team. And I don't think that bodes well for them against a team that's got a lot of experience under this spotlight.
Guys, we've been talking a lot about sides, but we have a question in the comments section about totals. People, they love betting overs, obviously, when it comes to the total. What do you guys think? Well, let's go around the horn. If there's a game, a matchup that jumps out to you that you want to bet the over.
BYU and VCU, from their three-point shooting perspective, that 142, 143, that's a low total. BYU is not a good defense. A lot of their games have gone over, particularly the ones at home, too. But I think that's already I've circled that as a total that should go over. I think when you look to some of these unders early, though, it's the big seeds against the small seeds because they will just limit them from scoring. And you know me, BP, what else will I do? I'll knock a team total under without breaking a sweat. Like, I'll just look at alternate markets.
Trig, I know you're not a huge totals guy. You did bring up the Bryant-Michigan State matchup earlier. Bryant, something we need to note, they play fast, 7th fastest adjusted tempo in the country. And Michigan State is a team that, even though they can't hit threes, somehow finds a way to score 80 points every game. I mean, is that something? I know that you said Bryant on their best day might have a shot. This is a game with a pretty high total, 150.5. And do you have any thoughts on that since you talked about that matchup earlier?
Yeah, I think that total feels kind of high. Like, listen, like Bryant does like to play fast, but don't sleep on Bryant's ability to defend, their ability to contest shots and rebound. Like, you know, again, I don't think it's the worst matchup in the world for Bryant. Like that's the one thing I've heard Izzo talk about before. Sometimes his team gets 3-point happy. He brought it up earlier this year before he played Oakland. That's a good friend of his, Greg Campy, that plays a very odd matchup zone that will typically, it's a good reference point because of course Oakland, Horizon League, America East, similar type teams, and this wasn't a good Oakland team this year. But if you look at those Oakland Michigan State matchups from previous years, Oakland they'll hang around for a little while, and then usually Michigan State, water finds its level, so on and so forth, and then they kind of pull away. They don't always cover, but that's that's a reference point. If Michigan State comes out and just starts kind of falling in love with the three against Bryant, again, they're very good at contesting shots. They have some length. They rebound. I actually think it probably leans it toward going under because I don't think Bryant's that bad defensively. And I think that their defense and rebounding could keep them in this game a little bit. So that kind of makes me feel like it's too much, too many points. And then, of course, if Michigan State does have a big lead, why run it up? You got to play again in 2 days. So I kind of lean under in this one.
Steve, is there an over that sticks out to you? If not, we do have a question from Instagram. Thoughts on a couple underdogs? We had talked about these earlier in the show, but we could always reiterate it. Josh Trueheart over from Instagram said he wanted some thoughts on the Drake Bulldogs. He likes them and said UC Davis. I assume he means UC San Diego, who is the Big West representative, of course, there. But the floor is yours, Steve. Any overs that, like you said, that was a previous question, or you could tackle those two underdogs that the commenter asked about?
Well, I'll just leave the total discussion on a general theory here. I mean, first of all, keep in mind that the first half lines are going to be about 6 to 8 points lower than the second half line. That's because the odds makers aren't dumb. They know in an elimination game like the NCAA tournament that teams are going to foul till their deathbed if they get behind in the second half. So when we're talking about these 20, 25-point favorites in the 1-2 seed games, you don't have to worry about that as much if you're playing an under. That does help you with an over in a tight game, even between two evenly matched teams. So that can bring, once again, a lot of random variance. The Houston line catches my eye. The line's 27.5. The total's 127.5. So it doesn't take much simple math there to tell you that SIU Edwardsville's team total is going to be 50 in that game. Do they get over 50 points? They did not think it every game this year, but I'm looking at Houston right now. When they played some crap teams to start the season, they held 3 of the first 4 to 45 or less. So that could be a fun team total, as Mark was talking about earlier. SIU Edwardsville under 50 if you dare. Back to Drake. We all like the Drake. Seinfeld loved the Drake. The Drake's a great guy. They're the slowest paced team in the nation. Let that sink in. 364 teams. Nobody plays slower. It's not UVA. It's not North Texas. It's not St. Mary's this year. It's Drake. And that is extremely dangerous. St. Mary's, Vanderbilt's one of the faster teams in the country. So you got to love the tempo, as you guys were talking about that game as well. You want to look for slow-paced teams against fast-paced teams, especially with not a lot of prep time and when they're not used to playing each other in general. They're not conference opponents. And that's always going to make something that makes my short list. So Drake will make it there. St. Mary's will make it probably in that the Vandy game, and I'll dig into them deeper this week. But it's a handicapping angle that works for you in the NCAA tournament. Thursday, Friday, but it's going to really work well for you Saturday, Sunday when they have exactly 1 day to prepare.
Steve, it's real interesting you brought up the top seeds playing those lower seeds in the team totals. Tennessee played St. Peter's last year. I think the first round, St. Peter's team total was ungodly low, and it still stayed under. But Rob Veno is a man who is certainly loves to bet in over. Rob, let me throw this question to you. Is there a game on the board right off the rip that screams points to you?
I think the first one, and I made a point to look at it right away, knowing that Boogie Fland is coming back for Arkansas. Kansas is listed at 144.5. Calipari went faster and faster as the season went on. Their scores got higher and higher. And without Adutero, it's kind of a hole in the middle for Arkansas. I know they got Big Z in there, but I think that when you're on the other side, Hunter Dickinson could have a big game, and I think Arkansas will push pace. And Kansas really doesn't back off of pace. So that was one. The other one I see, guys, and again, I'd love to know that I have Lipsy playing for Iowa State, but their total with Lipscomb is 142.5. Basically, for me to win this game, using the numbers that the odds maker is giving us over at DraftKings, 14.5 and 42.5, you need to get a 79-64 game. To me, that seems way more than reasonable. Lipscomb does nothing but run up and down the floor and shoot threes, and they do it really well. They shoot the ball overall really well. Bad conference, good shooters, though. And Iowa State can score. They just scored a whole bunch with 2 starters out over the weekend in a tournament game. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. Brian, real quick to your state there, Ohio. I looked at Akron. With Arizona, they're 167. And those 2 teams might make 167 look small. They really might. That could be one of those, 90. Well, if it went 90-79, it would still get over if Arizona won. But Akron can score with anybody. John Gross, great job there this year. Arizona absolutely can score. So we'll see.
BP.
So once led the Ohio University Bobcats to the Sweet 16. And Zeno, as you know, I attempted to bet an in-person under with that Akron-Toledo game on Friday. And that was, that didn't go well.
No.
That was a game that was on pace for about 200 points the entire way.
After making a 3. That's not good for your under, is it? No. Yeah, it's not.
Okay, now stop. We're not going to get into that right now.
Anyway.
Hold on. I'm going to throw to you, Zeno, in 1 second. I'm going to throw. Okay. Oh, you have one more over? No, please go with your over, and then I'll throw to you a different game. You got comments rolling in.
Actually, it was an under. And Trig mentioned it before when talking about Yale and A&M. Like, if we trust A&M's defense, right, to be able to limit Yale from 3, A&M's offense is awful. They barely shoot 42% from the field. They're not a good 3-point shooting team, and they play slow enough where they can grind this thing down against a Yale team. I mean, I would look to the under in that game at 142.5.
Zeno, I know you cannot talk objectively about Wisconsin right now, so I'm going to throw this one actually to Trig because Bill Siebert wants to know about the Montana-Wisconsin game.
22% they shot today. 22% they shot today. 22%. You and I can shoot 22%.
Well, maybe you
Why
could.
would they do such a thing?
I don't know.
I don't
because they wanted to upset Zeno, unlike me wearing the shirt.
This
was an accident. It was
They like the Drake.
Hey, can we have the second half of your shooting for this full game, Texas Tech? I'd love to be worse than you. Oh, wait, they Texas 19%, and Wisconsin did 22%. So, yeah.
Rick, Montana does not have a far drive there, right? Because that game's in Denver against Wisconsin, right? So, I mean, I mean, those are big states out there, but certainly at Ohio University in the geography class, they told me that Denver is a lot closer to Montana
It's just my
than
guess.
it is a lot to Wisconsin. Yes.
Yeah. So this is the problem with Montana. I'm worried that they can't stop anything Wisconsin's going to do. And I know, they didn't shoot well today, whatever. Like they've still been a pretty talented offensive team this year. And Montana doesn't really defend. Like that was the kind of the thing in the Big Sky this year. The Big Sky basketball, there wasn't much defense. Like the top teams in that league were very gifted offensive teams. Northern Colorado was a really good offensive team, played no defense. Northern Arizona had some and they weren't a top team, but they're just a team that I watched quite a bit. They had some stars on the offensive side of the ball.
Idaho played
no defense. Scoring. Yeah, no defense. And that's the thing. Montana, outside the top 250 nationally, defensively. So this is like a thing where, on the flip side, Montana shoots like close to 50% from the field.
Yeah.
But they do it against these other Big Sky teams that play no defense. So what are they going to do against a Wisconsin team that's been pretty solid defensively this year, all things considered, right? Like I think we can all agree Wisconsin's been pretty solid defensively this year.
Certainly not offensively.
This feels like, this to me feels like the potential blowout right here. I know they're in Denver, but you know what? To Wisconsin's point, to talk about Wisconsin, some of these, they had more travel than they ever had this year, right? Because now you get the Big 12 going out to the West Coast. So are they going to be put off by having to play in Denver? Probably not. I don't know that I have much faith in Montana. I'm gonna give you one that I do have some faith in. That's a similar double-digit underdog. I think Grand Canyon's got a real shot against Maryland, and I'm going to explain why. This team coming into the season, if you go back prior to the season started, there were people on networks talking about Grand Canyon being a top 25 team. That was a narrative that was thrown out there before the season. Now, things didn't pan out. Tyon Grant Foster was dealing with some academic eligibility stuff coming into the season. He missed some time. They ended up losing a game, I think, to UC Davis. And then they got to conference play. They lost one early. And I'm telling you right now, they kind of just said the hell with the regular season. We know that we've got to be ready to go for the WAC tournament. They literally didn't play. Like Grant Foster didn't play from like mid-February until the WAC tournament started. The team that showed up in Vegas this past week is like the team that Grand Canyon, everyone expected them to be this year. They covered every game. They trashed a good Utah Valley team. And let me tell you something. Grant Foster's a 6'7" guard. He's a big boy, and he defended bigs on Utah Valley last night. Like, that's a Utah Valley team that would size that was 16-1 in conference play. They only lost one game all season in conference play. This team they won last year, a tournament game. I'm just saying, like, Maryland, I've heard a lot of Maryland this, Maryland that. This is not like they're not elite at anything. They're good. They're not elite at anything, in my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the potential upset. I'm probably gonna take the points. I'll probably take the points here. I like Grand Canyon plus the points.
Oh, now see that? I mean, that is unbelievable. You know, I'll tell you what, Trig. I'm never, ever going to comment and say that a breakout is too long. You know why? I like learning. How about that, Zeno?
Oh, you're such a kiss ass town noser. Just shut up. My God.
All right. Dennis Brewster, we thank you for listening here. The comments continue to roll in from TikTok. He asked, does Memphis beat Colorado State? We just touched on that game a little bit. It's very interesting. As we all said, Colorado State, the favorite there. They come in as hot as any team in the country. He also thinks Drake can beat Missouri. Another question from TikTok. Steve, I'll throw it to you. And then, Rob, you can follow up if you want. Simone Gabriel thinks Louisville going to get first rounded. Louisville, we talked about how, hey, they're not playing far from home. They're playing within the Bluegrass State. They're a 1.5-point favorite against Creighton. Any thoughts there, Steve, as we have a commenter who believes Louisville is vulnerable in the round of 64?
Yeah, I mean, they had to play all the way to the ACC title game. That's another reason I like Clemson a little bit more. If you look at the net ratings, I think Clemson and Louisville are 22, 23. They're like exact, basically, in a lot of ratings. But I like the fact that Clemson went out a little bit earlier. Incredible turnaround story for Louisville. They, going into last night, had won 20 out of 21 games. To put that in perspective, 2 years ago, they went 4-28. Last year, they went 8-24. So, I mean, have they really improved that much in one season? I guess from that argument, you could say they're vulnerable. But I thought Louisville and Clemson are both teams that can make a little bit of noise. And, you know, talk about how UNC maybe didn't deserve to get in. We see this every year. Teams that don't deserve to get in often do quite well. The committee actually does a good job in that regard. And everyone thinks the ACC is as bad as they've ever been in 30 years, and me included. And everyone thinks the SEC is as good as it's ever been. I wouldn't be shocked if all of a sudden the SEC has teams go out early more than expected. You know, we talked about Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, some of these teams that maybe aren't that great. And all of a sudden, like Duke and Clemson go to the Elite Eight or the Final Four. So Louisville could be in that mix. And we're going to find out a lot about the ACC probably from this game because Creighton's a tough opponent as well. The Big East, obviously, is a conference between Villanova and UConn that's won more titles. Those two teams and all those other conferences combined have won in recent years.
I mean, I wonder how Louisville's going to handle Kalbrenner inside. Like I think that's the biggest mismatch for Creighton, and where they could take advantage in that game. I mean, I would, and Creighton's not a bad shooting team at all. I mean, you know, they're pretty complete on the offensive end. But I respect the hell out of Louisville. I think that's a really good team. I feel like they were a little bit underseeded, to be honest with you.
In case maybe both those teams are underseeded there, Zeno. How about Utah State upsetting UCLA? I know how you love Mick Cronin,
by the way,
Zeno.
do you think Mick Cronin was bitching and crying? Oh, we got to go all the way to Kentucky. Little midget. He's annoying.
Oh, that was rude.
He's annoying.
What do we think? Cronin.
I'd like to see Mick Cronin and Danny Hurley in a fight. That's what I want to see. I want to see who wins that. That would be great celebrity boxing. Just put those two guys in the ring together.
Utah State against UCLA, guys. Power slap. Maybe they can do that power slap thing. Rob Veno, his history says the Mountain West, save for that San Diego State run 2 years ago to the Final Four. The Mountain West, every year, everyone talks his conference up and they flame out in spectacular fashion. Do we think Utah State has a chance against UCLA? Mark Zeno has certainly made his feelings on Mick Cronin well documented to all the listeners here.
Guys, I'm staring here. Can anybody tell me which one of these regional sites that game is played in? I don't think it's going to favor anybody. It's in Lexington?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of UCLA this year, Brian. Utah State can shoot it, but they don't defend. And if Mick Cronin, you always have to wonder with Mick Cronin's teams, at what point do they tune him out, right? At what point does UCLA say, enough getting thrown under the bus by this guy? We're just going to go out and do what we want to do.
See?
Okay,
Not the only one.
It was mid-December, January this year.
Well, and then they played good, Steve. It was crazy because he went
I
berserk.
know.
He said his team was not physical, and then they go out and play well. If I had to, Brian, it's probably something I won't even look at as far as side is concerned. But if I had to, I think taking 5.5 is probably the better play there with Utah State. They do have the opportunity to win that game. I know what you're saying about Mountain West flaming out at times. And that blanket statement, you hit on it real quick about just betting conference because they're in a conference. These teams are all situational. Who they play, how they match up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Utah State might match up okay with UCLA. We'll see.
Let me ask you guys a question across the board. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this because it's something that I always take into account. Remember, some of these games start at like 11:30 in the morning, right? Like they start 11:30. These are not normal body clock games for a lot of these teams. Do you factor any of that into your handicap, particularly with totals or at least like, how teams will come out, whether they come out fast or slow? It's something I always look at. The earlier games to me indicate under. Teams are typically just not in their right frame of mind, not in the right body clock to be able to get going. Does anybody else look at that as part of the handicap? I'm curious.
Haven't we had a lot of like the bigger upsets early in the day? Like I'm just going off of memory. Last year we had Duquesne. I think Yale was an early game because it was early for the West Coast. Like it was like 4 p.m. I'll go back to some famous ones. Lehigh beat Duke very early in the day. Mercer beat Duke very early in the day, right? So I don't know. I feel like it's going to be, I'll go back to that Bryant Michigan State game. If that's an early tip and Michigan State's asleep at the wheel, like those are the ones I feel like can have the update. That's kind of like what I would look for the upside. I'm not saying it's.
The thing too is that in those spots, Trig, the smaller conferences play a lot more erratic schedules. They play a lot of Saturday 12 o'clock games or 2 o'clock games. They're not at the mercy of a TV schedule, where everything has to be in prime time. So if you get those smaller schools in the earlier window, I think it does benefit them because they're used to playing games at odd times, whereas the Big Ten and the SEC and everybody play the 3 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock windows.
And Mark, no one accommodates them. So they'll go November, December playing. Right. They might play 4 road games in 8 days just to get a couple bye games in and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's a good point. Good point.
Yeah, I'd say, guys, you look at it for sure, but even the instances that Adam just brought up, I always wonder if half of that isn't game planning. These teams, and Adam just brought up a bunch of, monstrous upsets, 1s and 2s getting knocked out. These 1s and 2s don't even game plan for 15s and 16s. They're game planning for the 8-9 game on Saturday. You know what I mean? They just skip right by it. So you wonder how much of an Auburn loss last year is not even knowing, hey, Danny Wolf is pretty good. Hey, who cares? We're getting by Yale. We're going to play somebody else on Saturday. So a lot of it, they travel early. They get there early. I think these coaches try the best that they can to get these guys adjusted to the time. But still, it's something you have to look at. But I think an added ingredient into that is, especially these 1-2s, they're game planning for the second round game. They're not even game planning for these 15-16s.
Hey, Rob, Morehead State over Louisville early in the day as well. Keep going.
What was that? 3-14?
That was a 3-14. That was a noon game. Norfolk State over Missouri was early. I don't know. I'm just going off the top of my head.
That's an incredible memory that you can remember these times and the upsets.
But I think the 2 16 seeds were both night games.
As long as you want to anytime.
No, FDU was a night game because we were all there.
And I think the UVA game was also the UVA game. But I will say this about I think it makes a little bit of sense. Like if you're a 16 seed and you pull the upset, if you're the 1 seed on Friday and it happens on Thursday, I maybe give that 1 seed a little bit of a bump in my handicap at that point because they're probably not going to come and sleep in anymore. So maybe you can use it in that regard. Right. So it would make sense that you see more upsets early. The other thing I'll point out real quick in closing is that, it's like the NFL with turnovers. 3-point shooting is the modern turnover equivalent. If you can predict the 3-point margins, you're going to get a lot of games right from both sides and totals. That is tricky to do. If you want to take that out of the equation, you can look at more games in which teams don't rely on threes or have a matchup down low from 2-point range. And that is something, obviously we do see. And also that pace difference I talked about. fast versus slow. I'm going to defer to the slow half-court teams because that also can cause havoc for teams that are not used to seeing that style.
Just the start of what's going to be a crazy week, obviously, here on WagerTalk TV. There will be a ton of breakdowns of all of these first-round matchups, obviously, in the upcoming days. Mark and I, of course, do the morning wager every
Best
Monday
show ever.
Friday. I'll tell you what, you would know, buddy. And, of course, WagerTalk today, they are going to offer up breakdowns there as well. So make sure, do us a favor, guys. You've been so nice to tune in here to the show. Click that subscribe button. We always appreciate your support. Of course, Trig, I know these first 4 games here, obviously, you can see the gray in my hair. I remember we didn't have first 4 games, but we do now. We don't have to wait as long. North Carolina, the big story, they got into the tournament. A lot of people weren't expecting them to get to the tournament. They are a 3.5-point favorite. Xavier's a 2.5-point favorite over Texas. We're going to wrap this up, guys, but I don't know. Trig, give any final thoughts here. You could touch on the first 4 games if you want any one of them, and if not, we'll just take this thing home.
Well, I'll leave the big games to someone else. I will say that St. Francis, Alabama State's interesting, contrasting styles. Alabama State athletes, St. Francis no athletes, but they space the floor. Like, those numbers are right in those two. So I kind of make them right where they are. I think St. Francis 3.5-point underdog, American about a 2-point favorite. I don't know. I don't really know that I have much there yet.
BP hates American.
I'll let someone else I'll let someone else comment on Texas, Xavier, San Diego State, North Carolina, because they're just not as in my wheelhouse, those 4 teams.
Yeah, St. Francis, Trig, of course. It was very funny. They advanced. No, we're not giving Zeno 2 more minutes to talk about Mick Cronin. No, we're not doing that, Mike, because 2 will turn into an hour. Anyway, St. Francis of PH, Trig, as you know, they won their quarterfinal and semifinal matchups by making 3 free throws to walk it off.
Yep.
Steve Merril, your thoughts? North Carolina, that was the first big story when these brackets were released. Right away, we learned that they were in the field of 68. They are the 3.5-point favorite against San Diego State. You mentioned earlier, a lot of these teams that people don't think get in tend to make the committee look pretty smart. You could talk about that. And if there's anything else you'd like to let all of our fine listeners know that you've got going on this week at WagerTalk.com.
Thank you, Brian. And I will say that North Carolina is actually not the worst team in the tournament. If you look at the net ratings, it's San Diego State. They're the lowest of all the teams to get in the Final Four. And the highest left out, I believe, was Ohio State. It was like 17 points higher than San Diego State. So
wow,
the best that got left out by the net rating, I think, was Ohio State.
Ken Pom disagrees with net rating, but
right, I was going to look at Ken Pom as well. Well, Ken Pom's gotten the highest left out mark at 39. I'm looking at it now, Northwestern after that.
Right, Ohio State's highest left out at 39. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's something for NIT, which we did not talk about. Whether that's a pro or a con, I don't know. You could say they're the most disappointed team in the nation maybe tonight is Ohio State. And keep in mind, Cornell, Ryan Earl's Cornell, before he left for William & Mary, took them down to the wire last year in the NIT, only lost by 2, I think, at Ohio State. So second year in a row that Ohio State very disappointed not to be in the tournament. Keep an eye on see who they get on the NIT, if they even accept it. Where I'll go with this game, though, these are maybe the last 2 teams in. Hey, these are the type of teams that make noise, right? You had a great point, Brian, earlier about almost every single year, including in 2011 when this format started, and Shaka Smart took VCU to the Final Four from the round of 4, that we see these teams normally advance. And here's a little trick, a little handicapping tip for brackets. Mark Zeno, you can put earmuffs on since you don't do brackets. But I will say this. If you want to put your bracket in on Thursday morning before it's due in most spots, pick the winner of this game to go deep, because most people have already filled out a bracket and probably just advanced whoever they're playing next. So it's a sneaky little strategy. And Mark Zeno, you can uncover your ears now. I've said all the F-bombs. No more earmuffs.
No, we know an 11 seed has or the 11 or 12, like they started doing 12s now. They've won at least, a game or 2 games. I think it's like 7 or 8 straight years now.
They're 500 the last since 2018. They showed that stat earlier. They're 500. It's like 12 and 12 or something. The 11 seed. So they've done extremely well. That's been the new 5-12, if you will.
Yeah.
Veno, I'm going to give you the last word. You've been waiting patiently here. Xavier, Texas is the game that I think maybe less people are going to pay attention to because of North Carolina, San Diego State. But you could talk about that matchup, or you could talk about anything else you've got going on that you think the people need to be paying attention to the next 3 days.
Well, I will pay attention to Texas Xavier, Brian, because as you guys were talking, I just 149 is the total of that game. There's been no better overplay in any way, shape, or form than Texas recently, and Xavier's right there with them. Texas scored 72 or 73 on Houston the other day, so I'll be looking at that for sure. A couple of things I learned here on the show. Wisconsin shot 22% today. Mick Cronin's not a great coach. And I will say this, to the point that Adam made earlier about, hey, we're here to bet games. How about this college basketball crown thing that we're going to get to bet on? 16 teams all dropped in Las Vegas for an extra tournament. So we got more than enough basketball to bet on here. You can find my work over at WagerTalk.com, all of our work at WagerTalk.com. But it's going to be a crazy week, guys. And I'll actually be in Las Vegas for the opening day there Thursday. So we'll see what these crowds are like. It's a little nuts over there.
Right. And Trig will be joining me here on Sunday, at least tentatively scheduled. Trig will be joining me in Cleveland to catch some second round action, perhaps. All right, guys. That's
Thank you so much. Maybe Brian. Maybe we'll be watching Brian. Maybe we'll be watching Brian after they pull you.
You are going to will this Brian team to victory over Tom Izzo. I'll tell you what. I'm not going to be able to invite my father-in-law if you're going to keep talking that way. He's a proud Michigan State alum. All right. For Mark Zeno.
You're still wearing that stupid Michigan jacket. Hold on. I wanted to do my Mick Cronin impression.
Okay. Oh, please do. Please do.
Is this going to be the last word? Yeah, do a Mick Cronin impression, please.
When it gets all upset,
Are you sitting there? Got a real question? You asked me about the travel? Like, we're going east 3 times. We got to come back again 3 times for the end of February. I mean, that's a real question? You're going to ask me about the travel? Of course it affects my guys.
little punk.
And he's got to go to Lexington, Eastern time zone again.
Right, he's got to go back east.
I can't tell you how many times we had to go east this year. I've seen the Statue of Liberty 3 times. It's not even March yet. What do you want to do?
What is the finger thing there? Is he missing
He
his
was
mouth?
laying his hands on his face. He was like apoplectic that he got a question. So he was just like, he was like befuddled. His hand was like this. And
I thought he was doing like wise guy with a cigar. Yeah. See?
No, sorry.
Well, I thought it was wise guy with a cigar.
That's what I was trying to think. That was
funny.
Yeah. I thought Looney Tunes also, Rob. I did think Looney Tunes, but I couldn't remember the character. It was like, yeah, you think you're a smart guy. Yeah, how about that?
You're a smart guy, see? He was just like, but he was sitting like this when the guy asked me the question as if he was like, oh my God, how dare you ask me this question about the travel?
Mark, did it make you feel better when they flew his 83-year-old father out for him to lose his 500th chance at a win when they were a 12-point favorite against Minnesota? Did that give you some happiness when that happened?
No, the only happiness I got from UCLA is the one time I did bet them going east on a 5% play. I think it was against Indiana. Yes, it was against Indiana when they won that game there. I laid like 2 points and they won by like 5 or 6.
I met Cronin out at a bar in I met Cronin at a bar in Saratoga back like 2009, maybe 2010. He was really cool. He was out till like 4 a.m. Yes, the Saratoga
you must be this tall to get into the bar. Like, did he do that?
He was short.
He
was very short.
With that, will you stop?
Well, guys, I think when Trigger's telling Mick Cronin bar stories, it's time to wrap it up, BP.
I agree. Guys,
he slipped him a Mickey.
Jacket off. You look ridiculous. Michigan sucks.
He spiked his drink.
Look, I can't fit into those mediums you wear, pal, all the time, all right? I got to wear something. I'm a 4-year-old guy who lives on IPAs and burritos, all right? My physique ain't the best. So anyway, for Steve Merril, for Mark Zeno, for Adam Trigger, and for Rob Veno, I still am, as a matter of fact, Bryan Power. I don't know how long that'll be. But this was the WagerTalk Sunday Selection Show, guys. Smash that like button if you enjoyed it.
Oh, my God. I just wanted to send a shout-out to my favorite handicapper at WagerTalk, Mark Zeno. I've got your big ticket waiting for later, so call me. Let's make a sloppy parlay together.
Yes.
Sloppy parlay love.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if she's Irish, Mark.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Whatever she is.
She's all yours. Whatever she is, she's all yours.
Yeah.